Hello and welcome to another edition of A Lot of Help with James Lott Jr. I'm, of course, James Lott Jr. Here on my network, JLJ Media, I'm a certified life coach, professional organizer, and all kinds of things, of course. That's why I love doing the show, because I get to talk to people who are trying to affect positive change in the world, and I'm all about that, especially if they're people of color, too. I don't apologize for that. I don't. I really don't. Because we have to support each other, because a lot of people won't. That's how we do
Yes.
that. And this episode, folks, just for you guys to understand, we'll be having a not so secular slant. We'll talk about that in a second also. I love it. I love this. So she is a graduate of Azusa Pacific, a Christian university here in Southern California. She holds a master's degree in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy. And so she wrote this book it's coming out, but next week, this week, as we're doing this.
It's actually already out on Amazon, but the official launch date is Saturday,
Perfect.
November 19th. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, there you go. And so I'm going to show the book. It's called Many Voices, One Truth. Here it is, Tracy Taris. Hi, Miss Tracy.
Hello there, Mr. James.
Yes. I'm going to ask you a question first that I get asked all the time in another way. So this is how follow what I'm saying here. So
Okay.
people say, are you a Black host? Or are you a host who happens to be Black? So when I read the book, and I looked at the book, it was always the question for me. When I read the book, I go, is it a Christian self-help book, or is it a self-help, self-care book that just it's Christian? So I'm just kind of curious how you define it, because I have an aunt who has PhDs in Christian clinical psychology. Because there's a secular version and there's a Christian version, but she's like she's
Yeah.
a person. I mean, so I'm curious what you define yourself this book.
Okay, so the book is a self-care book from a Christian perspective. So if you were to ask me if I were a Christian therapist or a therapist who happens to be Christian, I would say I'm a Christian therapist. But I see a lot of people who are not Christian or who do not identify as Christian.
Me too. I see it's yes, that weird. Like my aunt Faith, she got both secular degrees and Christian degrees. Both.
Mm-hmm.
She can do both. But for her at this point, she's like, everything comes from a Christian perspective anyway. It all boils down to that in the first place, right?
Yeah.
That's the point. If that's what you're Christian, that's the point. But I was just curious because you're right. Some people they'll say I add Christian elements in the story, or I add Christian elements, but I'm a therapist. I'm just
Yes.
this way. But you're like, no, I'm telling you, I'm a Christian therapist, correct?
Yes. Yes, that's the perspective. It's the lens. Like the word of God is in me a lot. Like it's in the fiber of my being, having been, I grew up Catholic, but then now I'm non-denominational. I became non-denominational about 25 years ago. And so have been reading and studying the word probably almost every day for the last 25 years. So it's, I tell people who are not Christian that I let them know that's the perspective I'm coming from. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna, open the Bible in session or anything like that. But it does mean what it means to me is that I see the human being as made in the image of God. And so I have a lot of respect for that. And so people are usually, oh, okay. Like when Christians come in, they do want the word to be a part of their treatment plan. And so I honor that. And sometimes they don't, because sometimes people have been hurt by other people in the faith, and they don't really want, any of that as an element for now. But eventually they start softening towards God. And that's not my goal. It's just something that the Holy Spirit ends up doing in the therapy process.
And that's how I felt reading this book. You had mentioned passages throughout. It felt very natural. Just for me when I was reading it, going, oh yeah, you talk about this, and you mentioned a passage that goes with that, and you speak in very relatable terms from what I read when I'm reading this book, very relatable, and you add the Christian element. I mean, I was like, to me, it flowed very nicely. It was very natural.
Thank you for that.
Perspective of that, and I think that's actually what I want to get into is that I had to explain to some folks. We were talking before the show. What's going from Louisiana families and Creole families, and mostly they're Catholic. And a lot of my friends are like, "But you're Black. If they're from the South, you're Catholic." I'm like, "There's a whole thing there, right? Isn't there there's a whole thing there where we were raised Catholic, a lot of us later leave and become non-denominational. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. I get that all the time, like from friends, like, how are you Black? And then we're raised, not Baptist or, in the Catholic Church. And Louisiana is a very Catholic state. The French and the Spanish, went there and settled in, and that was the religion of both. And yeah, they just kind of spread it out. It's a very Marian state too, meaning that not only is it Catholic, Jesus's mom is a big deal there. So yes, I get the same thing.
I get all the time. It's like, folks, that's how it works. My grandmother, 96 years
Yeah.
old, still goes to the Catholic Church every other day. That's great thing. I moved on also non-denominational too. But what I like about this is that you give really great stuff. And I know that for a lot of people of color, they don't go to therapy. Many times they'll go to a pastor or someone pastoral to talk. I feel like this is both almost. You're not
Yeah.
saying you're a pastor, but saying that you're getting the word, which a lot of Black folks are looking for to help them with some clinical knowledge. When I say that, what does that make you think when I say that?
It makes me think of how I was raised in the non-denominational faith. I had some great experiences of pastoral counseling by, both men and women, in my church. And my husband and I, we've had some great pastoral counseling. Like if for some reason we hit a bump, there's always another person there. Like if we're open about it, there's always someone there to help us. So I've been pastorally counseled, and that's what I found was different about non-denomination and Catholic. Like in the Catholic faith, there's not a lot of that. I don't know if that's different now, like if there's more counseling of members now. But when I was growing up, what happened in your house was, your business, and, the priest and the nuns, and nobody, really spoke into that. But up in this non-denominational, and it's just a Church of Christ, non-denominational church, there's been people that would speak, like if we invited someone to help us or something like that. And so I think that even though I have the clinical background, I'm coming from a place of where I've had a lot of strong, faithful people speaking into my life and helping me in a counseling capacity. And so I think a lot of that does end up in the book.
Going to a Christian university and learning this, has it been easy to reconcile the clinical with the Christian for you?
That's exactly why I chose Azusa Pacific, is because it is a Christian university. And I had people in my life, because a lot of Christians think that, psychology is not necessarily a good thing and you need to pray. And if you're not praying hard enough, that's why you get depression. And if you're not reading your scriptures, that's why. And it's just not true. Like, I mean, I think that that's less and less now. There's more and more people of faith coming to understand the value of therapy and psychology in helping to shape and form the spirit of the person as well as the soul. I mean, psychology is the study of the soul. Like if you were to Google it now, you'll see it's the study of relationships and behaviors and emotions. And it is that, but the original Greek definition was that it's the study of the soul. And I knew that I wanted to help, people of faith and all people, but I wanted it to be grounded and rooted in the word. I wanted to be grounded and rooted in God and in Jesus. And so I chose Azusa Pacific for that reason. Like when I had the thought of becoming a therapist, it just came out of the blue. And one of my cousins, her name is Christy, she recommended Azusa Pacific because she had looked into it for herself. And at the time, my husband and I had been recently married. We hadn't had a baby yet, but I knew we wanted to have a baby. But I also needed to continue working. And Azusa had a schedule that would work, align with my work schedule. So I only applied there, and, thankfully I got in.
That's good. That's good. What is the through line of the book that you want people to get out of it?
The through line would be to stop believing lies about yourself. You are made in the image of God. The Lord Jesus Christ came and died for you so that you can have eternal life. There's so many wonderful and glorious things about us as human beings. The Bible speak to a lot of good and who God made us to be and how much we have. A lot of people are hard on ministers that are prosperity gospel ministers and things like that. And, I just think that we all have a message. We all have a different, like some of us, have to preach the fire and brimstone elements, of the Bible. And some of us have to preach the encouragement. What I hope my book does is helps the person to understand who they really are and get back to who God created them to be. So I would think that the through line of the book is becoming who you were originally created to be and peeling off the layers by, ejecting some of the lies in your heart and in your soul so that you can blossom and flourish into becoming that person that God intended when he made you.
Yes. Well, one of the things you talk about, I told her I did read the book. One of the things I was like, recently, I changed the channel recently on something. I read a section, another section about changing, but because what you just said now is what really feeds into what I just did. I'm trying to in my world of media and press and what I do, I try to pronounce the positive. Not a Pollyanna or anything like that. I try to pronounce the positive. I also try to give voices to the voiceless and things like that. You won't get chances. So
Yeah.
Twitter, our favorite Twitter, I recently changed the channel on that because I found myself surrounded by people who really did not give a crap about me. The people that I was following, people that were following me. Yeah, I have some fans, followers, what you call people. But the rest of the people that I was following, it was all just this kind of cesspool of gossip that was about earlier judgment, not observation. They claim it's observation, but it's judgment.
Yeah.
And shadiness and all that. And I mean, if it's in a fun way, I can do it. But I found that it wasn't fun anymore, and it was not feeding me anymore. And so I was like, I can leave. I don't have to be there, or I can modify what I'm doing there.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's like, but when you're living, you get into the minutia, whatever. Just get into your life. Sometimes you forget that. You kind of get into the middle of just like, I gotta be on Twitter, I gotta be on this one, I gotta be on this one. You're just doing it, and the feelings are hurting you, but just not even, you're not taking care of yourself, right? I mean, it's.
Well, let me speak on something. Now, this isn't, well, in the book, I use the analogy of because when we grew up, the primary channels were ABC, NBC,
Yep.
CBS, and PBS.
Yeah.
And I use the analogy of just as you can turn off those channels, change the channel, turn off the television, you can also decide to do that with the voices. The voices that I name in the book are self, Satan, society, and savior. Like you can decide which channel you're going to tune into and which channel you're going to turn off. Now, the thing that you're talking about with regards to all of the voices like on Twitter and social media and stuff like that, I'm going to have to write another book on this, what I'm about to tell you. But a lot of times when people are saying really hurtful things online and tearing another person down, that's biochemistry that's connected to that. Like we all have neurochemicals and biochemicals that are coursing through our body all day long. Like the ones that I deal with in my profession, there's all kinds that are more of a medical nature. These are of a medical nature, but also emotional and relational as well. But like the stress hormone of cortisol, people actually get addicted to that. And the hormones of epinephrine and adrenaline, like the fight or flight, people will put themselves in situations where they just pick fights or, put themselves in dangerous situations where they have to run away from, like, the adrenaline junkies, the people that like to base jump and jump out of airplane stuff. But you could also get yourself used to and addicted to, if you will, to the hormones of oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical. Like when you read something online that someone posted about someone else or even about you that's positive, it produces a bonding effect. You can get used to serotonin and dopamine. Like when people suffer from depression and anxiety, there's tweaks in that. Like there's not enough, serotonin or too much dopamine, depending on what's going on with the person. But like, I think we see a lot of vitriol out there is because people are used to shock. They're used to nastiness and negativity. And they're not even aware that their body has taken over. Like your brain, your body doesn't care whether it's positive or negative. It just wants what it's used to. So you have to take the time to cultivate the more positive, the more life-giving and life-affirming biochemistry that is at your disposal. And if you practice some of the prayer and other practices and many voices, one truth, you will train yourself, you will train yourself to promote, dopamine and serotonin and instead of the cortisol and whatnot.
Yeah, because I like to think you pray, switch your focus, prepare, get a new perspective, live your life.
Mm.
Those 5 things I like the most. That's it.
Yes.
That's what you have to get to that point. But it's like, but I mentioned social media. But I mentioned for me that once I switched off, I'm doing much better. My spirit feels better. I
Yeah.
just feel calmer. Because you're
Because
right,
you're out.
you get hyped up
Yeah.
in there too, and I just feel calmer.
Yeah.
And I think, and see, in my business, there's a lot of already imposter syndrome going around with my. I have colleagues who they're wonderful. Like you're great. Like, why do you feel like you don't belong here? Like what you did the work. I always think that's Satan. Or I say things like, um, it's divine intervention. I wrote that song because God gave it to me in 20 minutes. And they're like, divine
Yeah.
intervention. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, I didn't come up with that. I mean, he came up with it. I was open to it, and I was a vessel. I always say it all the time. I was a vessel that came through. I wrote that show. I wrote those questions, or like it doesn't matter. I always when I say those different things, and when I mention God and Satan, it's always a very interesting thing in my business. But we're all caught up in those voices, and your book talks a lot about the voices.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so prevalent, right? It's just such a prevalent thing. We
Yeah.
those
And
voices.
they're on automatic. They're on automatic playing in the back of your mind, just like, the living room TV is going, but you're in the kitchen cooking, not even listening to it, but you're still being influenced, by what you're hearing. You just don't know that you're being influenced.
Yes, I'll tell you something, a little funny thing, because it's also fun. God likes to laugh too. We have a good time, God. We have a good time. But QVC, my
Hmm.
mother's hooked. A lot of her friends are all hooked. Okay, I never got it. So one day, it's my TV right here, folks, and I had it on in the background. She just said background. I had it on the background, and I was like doing something else, like not even really paying attention. But my ear would catch stuff, the way they talk, the cadence, how they
Yeah.
sell items. Suddenly, I
Yeah.
want to go online and start buying stuff. And I'm
Yep.
like, I don't need it. I don't need it. But the way they were saying it, I wasn't even really. I'm thinking, if I'm just sitting there really paying attention, how dangerous that could be for my pocketbook. But I wasn't even paying attention. I was kind of like half paying attention. I'm like, I get why people buy stuff. Like, I want that Christmas set too, Black Santa. Sure, I want that too. Like, it's like all of a sudden, you're right. It's like things get into your brain. They still permeate in there and talk to you,
Yeah.
don't they?
Yeah, just because the suggestion or the thought of buying it will release some endorphins that makes you feel good. Like that's why window shopping, that's what I tell people that are like kind of shopaholics. Go window shopping. You'll release the same chemistry and you
Yes.
don't have to buy anything, So it's the same stuff that's going on.
You also
You
mentioned something
know?
that's very important. And I'm trying to I ask God every day, because I pray every morning. So I pray for about a half an hour every morning. I read Psalm
Mhm.
91 first, and then I pray and do my whole thing to protect myself and the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a great one. And a lot of Psalms are good, like Psalms 5, 7, they're all pretty good. But here's the thing.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to learn judgment versus observation. I'm trying to work. I have a forked tongue of sorts. I come from a family of forked tongues. So I'm learning, and we laugh about it in my family. We're all kind of learning how to, because we're all a God-fearing family. They're all learn how to just observe. And you talk about the versus judge. Can you talk about that a little? Because I think a lot of people need to hear some of this stuff. We read the book, of course,
Okay.
for more detail, but I want you to kind of touch on that too.
Yeah, in the book, I talk about the difference between judgment and observation. And so If you want to, if you feel like, judgment is a problem, for you, and it was a problem for me too. And sometimes I still have to catch myself. But the way I pull myself out of it is to think of leading with compassion and a listening ear. Because no matter what a person is doing, 9 times out of 10, no matter how bad it seems to be or how jacked up it seems to be, per your perspective, there's something that's driving that person, and there's a reason they're doing something. And so when you lead with compassion and a listening ear, you make yourself more open, to that person, to help them if that's what they're wanting. Like sometimes people don't want help, they just want to be themselves and be loved and accepted. Like understanding that we all have our own journey, and I might be further down the road than someone in something, but once upon a time I probably was where they were. And someone else might be further down the road than me. And once upon a time, they were where I was. Like, again, life is a journey. Like, if you're not going to decide, to walk alongside people and journey alongside them, like if it's just in your bones to just judge them, then leave it alone. Like, let them be open to finding someone. So like a judgment is you taking in information, passing it through the filters of your experience and what you think is true, and then coming to some kind of conclusion, like without any kind of information, like without any kind of truth from that person or from that person's situation. An observation is you taking in information that's coming from that person, either from what they're saying or what they're doing, but it's them stating, what's going on. And you're just there as an observer. And even as an observer, putting it aside because it's not our job to judge anyone. Again, everyone's just trying to live their life and figure it out one step and one day at a time. So, if you have resources that other people can use and they ask you, then provide those resources, but try to do it from a compassionate and loving place, understanding that none of us are better than any one of us, because where some excel and have figured things out, the rest of us have not, and vice versa. So we should try to help one another when we're in that position to do so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I always say, where's the compassion or something? Where is the compassion? It's like, right now everybody's yelling at each other. We just see that it's just how it is right now. Everybody's just yelling and screaming and putting their flag in the sand and putting their flag in there,
Yeah.
drawing lines and like, but let's like take all that out. Let's take all that out and
Yeah.
like just where is the I want someone start singing, where is the love? No,
Yeah, exactly.
like where
Where
is it? Like
is it?
seriously,
Well,
where is it?
that's cortisol. All that is people being used to the anger and the
Yeah.
angst and all of those kinds of chemistry. But when you can start recognizing that shot that you feel, because you do feel something, you can stop yourself in it, change what you're thinking about, and invite, love and warmth and freedom, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I reading your book. One of the things this is to me a very great thing. It feels like if you follow some of the principles in your book, freedom will happen for you. I
Yeah.
feel like there's a lot of things that is in the Bible. A lot of the things you're talking about as a therapist, both together, it's going to lead to freedom for somebody out there from what
Yeah.
situations they're feeling. And I love that about this book is that there's hope in the book. There's
Yes.
there's freedom in the book. There's compassion in the book. There's explanation in the book. So I thought
Yeah.
that's a great thing too. I think it's a great thing to get people like, just read what I have to say. I'm bringing some principles in from God. I'm also got my principles from my learning and my practice, because she has a practice also,
Mhm.
together. And I think folks, it's freedom. It's like literally, it's like you'll start feeling, because I know I feel better as a person now than I did,
Yeah.
20 years ago, 10 years ago. I feel much freer as you start to let go of and
Yeah.
figure out what yourself, figure out who you are, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there is much freedom. I mean, that's what Jesus came for, is to give us freedom, from the bondage of all of these things that, keep us in bondage, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's maybe. So, so I want to also find, because I always interesting. People pick forewords. Somebody write a foreword. I've written a foreword before, so I was very curious.
Mhm.
So, Who is Byron Person?
Byron is a really good friend of mine, and he is, oh my gosh, how can I explain Byron? Byron is an advocate for the soul to get to know Christ, to get rid of all of the works orientedness, all of the fear of the Bible and fear, of, hell and damnation. Not that he doesn't say there isn't a hell, but he focuses the person on the love and compassion of Christ and the relational aspects of being in a relationship with God, rather than checking all these boxes and following all these man-made rules and things like that. And so I felt that, Byron would be a good person to write my foreword, and Byron respects me a lot. So he said, yeah, send me the manuscript, let me read it. And he read it, and he liked it. So he not only endorsed it, he also wrote the foreword for it. But Byron leads this forming class, and it's usually like a 8 or 10, maybe it's a 12-week class, and I've done it a couple of times, and my husband and I are in it now. And he does it on Zoom now, which is good, because with COVID, the forming class, and forming is how to form your spirit, like how to take the word of God and cultivate this relationship with God, whereby you're not working for it. And he uses the analogy of rowing a boat rather than sailing a boat. And so for those of us who are trying to sail, we're learning to lean into the spirit and allow God to shape and form our spirit without us trying to do all these works-oriented things to try to please God, because God is already pleased with us. And so now that it's online, Byron has the one that we're in now. There's people from Africa, from different countries in the Middle East, from different countries in Asia. I think it's like, he told me all the different countries, and I was doing like little tick marks. It's like 12 countries.
Wow.
So that's one thing. Like COVID really opened up the whole thing about Zoom and speaking to people all over the place. So yeah, so Byron is an advocate for the person cultivating a relationship with God that's based on leaning into the spirit and not trying to work your way into a relationship with God.
Like that. Now, on a side note, the other side of this is you wrote a book. So how was that experience for you?
Oh, it was mixed blessings. Like there were some mornings that I would get up and I felt like I was just a conduit, like, the spirit was just speaking, and I was able to go. And because I had gone to this writers retreat, and one of the takeaways from the writers retreat was to two of the takeaways that I went away with was never be away from your project for 3 days, because 3 days turns into 3 weeks, into 3 months, whatever. And to at least write 1,000 words a day. So each morning I would get up and I would write 1,000 words a day. And when, it went smooth sailing, I could do that in an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then when it wasn't, it would take 3 or 4 hours. But like you said, I have a private practice. So normally I start seeing clients at around 1 o'clock. And so I have the whole morning. If I needed those 4 hours to get to those 1,000, I would do it. I would use it because, I have my own business, so I can come in and schedule clients and whatnot whenever it's good for me. And that's a good writer's schedule, because I'm a morning person, so I get the most work done in the morning.
Yeah, and that's a good. Okay, folks, I know I have another show called In Between the Pages, James. We get more into that, but I just want to say, folks, I write books too. So, folks, I always say, write when you are ready to write. You pick the best. If you're a night person, write at night. If you're a day person, write at night. Don't force yourself to write at a time when you're not normally ready to do anything. So that's just a little small tip for writers. And then congratulations, seeing the book finish. It's your new baby. You have 2 daughters and now another daughter or son, or what do you want to call this book. How does that feel? How does that feel?
It feels wonderful. It's like I feel like I want to cry as you ask me that question, because I've wanted to be a writer my whole life, and there's lots of things that I've started and have not completed. And even this one, the idea for this one came in 2011 when one of my baby sisters had a stroke at such a young age. So the idea came during that time, but I didn't really start writing it until 2017. And even then, I would pick it up, put it down. And then I went to that writer's retreat in 2019. and I was pretty much able to continue on. But one of the biggest catalysts was my daughter, my youngest daughter, would times when she was a teenager, she still is, she's 18 now, but when she was early and mid-teens, she would struggle with, negative thoughts and negative thinking. And this is a well-loved, well-supported, well-grounded kid. Right. Good grades, loves people. I mean, she's very sassy, like she has a spirit of her own, but she would still have like these negative thoughts, like, and it doesn't matter what kind of home you come from. This is something that every person deals with. Like if you're not loved and supported and not well grounded, I think it probably can, cause it to be a lot more. But even if you do come from a relatively functional family, you can still struggle with these. And so she worked really hard to overcome that. And so I dedicated the book to her, because her fighting through that really caused me to put my butt in the chair every morning at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and, commit to those 1,000 words to get finished,
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. Well, congratulations, Tracy. It's
Thank you.
Many Voices, One Truth. You get on Amazon, and even if you see this way later, hear this way later, go to your bookstores or get it out. The official launch is the 19th of November, which is this month. It's a great book, and I recommend it for everyone to get it. Everybody run. I'm telling you, them to get it. And it's your birthday, so congratulations on another year of life.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're doing great work for the world, so we appreciate you. I see you, and I appreciate you very much. Tell the folks out there where they can find your practice. Like if they want to join your practice, like join.
Okay. Well, first, can I throw one thing out there?
Please
Earlier,
do.
When you were mentioning freedom,
yes.
In the book, I teach about centering prayer, and you'll see what that is when you get the book. But for like months and months, when I would do centering prayer, the word freedom would come. And it's like every day I usually choose one, because centering prayer is about finding a word or phrase to focus on as you're meditating, and you just meditate on that word and you'll see what it means. But freedom is there. I think God had that word come to me day after day, probably for a month or two. It wouldn't change. And so I would focus on freedom, and I think just knowing that there is freedom to be had. I'm sure a lot of that is in the book because that word kept coming to me. And I want every person listening to know that you are already free. You just have to embrace it. You just have to change your mind about how you're thinking about things. But if you want to get,
and that's what I'll say. That's why I said freedom, because I got that out of your book. As I said, I got that out of your
thank you. Thank you. So mission accomplished.
Yes, it works. So go ahead.
If you want to contact me, you can find me online at healingthemindandspirit.com. That's my group therapy practice. I have several therapists here who work with me and a couple of interns, and we provide therapy for couples, families, individuals, teens, and children. And we operate online. So if you're anywhere in California, you can call our front office at 661-481-0017. And Emily will pair you with the therapist that's probably the best suited for you. I can also be found at tracytaris.com. That's TracyTaris.com. And you can join my email subscription list, and you'll get like newsletters from time to time and blogs on different things that God is teaching me that I, feel led to share with the world and encouraging the world, and, anybody who reads that. And if you put in my name on Amazon, you will find the book, Many Voices, One Truth. I think that's it. I'm also on Instagram with Healing the Mind and Spirit and at Tracy Taris. And I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn.
I'm sure I'm following you. So that's okay. I'll put this all in the description, folks. All in the description. But you've heard all that. So yeah, that's there. And of course, I'm James Lott Jr., alotofhelp.com. That's 2 T's, not 1. And a lot of help on Facebook, James Lott Jr. Everywhere you want to be, you cannot hide from me. I'm everywhere. And everyone, please have a really great day. And again, I'm all about compassion and care and uplifting our people who are doing positive things. And Tracy is doing that with her book, Many Voices, One Truth. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Next time. Bye.